Stop. Stop.
I'm sorry for what happened to your uncle, but
Just stop.
you life in prison.
I made my ruling.
I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to betray me as.
It was so very hard for me to tell a 5-year-old his dad would never come home.
I don't regret it. The only thing that I regret is that he was killed too. I wish I killed more of those motherfuckers.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. You took it upon yourself to end my son's life. You changed our lives forever.
Jonaiki Martinez Estrella, who was facing murder charges in New York, was involved in a horrific crime that took place on the night of June 20th, 2018. Estrella, along with Manuel Rivera, Elvin Garcia, Jose Minez, and Antonio Santiago, brutally stabbed and killed 15-year-old Leandro Guzman Feliz. All 5 were members of a notorious Dominican gang known as the Trinitarios. Reports indicate that Leandro had left his Bronx apartment to meet a new friend just a few blocks away when 4 cars suddenly pulled up, marking the beginning of the tragic event. Mistaking him for a rival gang member, the cars began chasing Leandro, eventually cornering him near a local bodega. CCTV footage from inside the shop shows a desperate Leandro seeking refuge, frantically trying to hide behind the counter. However, he was soon spotted by one of the gang members. A scuffle ensued, and Leandro was forcibly dragged out of the bodega. What happened next shocked the entire city of New York. Armed with large knives and machetes, the 5 gang members took turns brutally stabbing the helpless teenager. They then fled the scene in getaway cars, leaving Leandro gravely injured. After the attack, a severely injured Leandro managed to re-enter the shop, seeking help, but was tragically sent away. Outside, fading fast, Leandro gestured towards onlookers, desperately trying to signal them to call 911. He then started running towards St. Barnabas Hospital, just a short block away, before collapsing at the entrance. Passers-by desperately tried to save Leandro, but shockingly, 2 police officers stood by, watching the scene unfold. They were later investigated for failing to intervene. Just 20 minutes later, Leandro succumbed to a fatal stab wound to his neck. Police soon obtained the CCTV footage and arrested the 5 suspects, charging them with first-degree murder.
Police have arrested the 5 suspects accused in the murder of this teenager in the Bronx.
At their trial, a 6th member of the Trinitarios gang, Kevin Alvarez, testified against the 5 murderers.
He's testifying in court against 5 of his fellow alleged Trinitarios gang members.
Alvarez, who had helped drag Leandro out of the bodega, identified the suspects in exchange for a lesser sentence on conspiracy charges. Eventually, the jury convicted the 5 gang members for the brutal murder of Leandro Guzman Feliz. At their sentencing, the killers showed no signs of remorse. Instead, they waved gang signs and shouted gang slogans. Jonaiki Estrella, who delivered the fatal blow, was sentenced to life without parole. Jose Minez, Elvin Garcia, and Antonio Santiago each received 25 years to life, while Manuel Rivera was sentenced to 23 years to life in prison. Leandro Guzman Feliz tragically lost his life for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what happens when a popular music artist is killed in broad daylight, as in the case of Jay and Roy, a rapper popularly known as XXXTentacion? Jose Onfroy was tragically killed during a robbery in Florida on June 18, 2018. The 20-year-old in Roy was out shopping for a motorcycle with his step-uncle, Leonard Kerr. Earlier that day, Onfroy had withdrawn about $50,000 from the bank to make his purchase. the young rapper was unaware that he was being stalked by four men: Michael Boatwright, Trayvon Nome, Dedrick Williams, and Robert Allen. Allen even followed in Roy into the dealership to confirm that it was indeed the rapper. Then, as he left the shop, Onfroy's car was intercepted by a black SUV. Armed with guns and their faces covered with masks, Boatwright and Nome stepped out of the SUV and robbed Onfroy at gunpoint. A scuffle ensued, and the two men fatally shot the rapper before grabbing his bag of cash and fleeing the scene. A passerby filmed the immediate aftermath of the attack and called 911. Another video captured Onfroy's lifeless body in the driver's seat of his BMW. The tragic incident left the hip-hop industry in shock, with popular artists like Diplo and J. Cole paying tribute to the teenage sensation. Shortly afterwards, the four men were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery.
You are charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree.
However, Robert Allen took a plea deal in exchange for his testimony in the trial of the other 3 men. The trial began with the prosecution claiming that Onfroy's murder was pre-planned and executed with precision.
561. So ask yourselves, that's more than enough time to formulate the premeditated intent and the design to kill someone and the killing.
Boatwright's lawyer suggested that Robert Allen, who had yet to testify against the 3, would lie in court.
Robert Allen is the only person that you will hear from that puts Michael Boatwright at Riva Motorsports on June 18, 2018. But let me be very clear. If Robert Allen testifies in this case, he will lie.
Then, Williams' lawyer incredibly threw accusations at popular hip-hop artist Drake, arguing that the Grammy Award-winning rapper was to be blamed for Onfroy's death, claiming that Drake had a motive before X's death.
And do you think that for one moment, here today, days after the event, he's killed by 2 masked men, right? He came out on social media and said, guys, before he dies, if anybody kills me, it's Drake. Do you think in that time span that they went and they addressed him, they talked to him? No. Do you think sitting here today, years later, any detective has ever asked, Drake or anybody like that? No.
He also accused Robert Allen of getting paid by Drake to testify against the other defendants.
In 2018, did you receive from either Drake or one of Drake's associates?
I never met Drake.
You never met Drake?
No.
Do you know who he is, though, right?
Finally, Nome's lawyer argued that there was no physical evidence linking his client to the crime.
The evidence will not show that any firearm was ever recovered that could be matched or linked to Trayvon Newsom. The evidence will show no DNA whatsoever found on the body of Mr. Onfroy or on that car.
He was wrong. The prosecution presented a boatload of evidence in court, including CCTV footage from the crime scene. However, it was 3 pieces of damning evidence that ultimately settled the case. The first was the testimony of Onfroy's step-uncle, Leonard Kerr, who fled the scene of the shooting. He described what actually happened that day.
As I tell you, the taller guy went around to Jassie's side. The shorter one now come around to the door that I was, my door that I opened, and he go inside the car. And then I heard something like, hi. How much time I don't know, but I heard something like this.
Kerr also reenacted the moment Onfroy was shot, providing a crucial account of the events.
Come out the effing car, and he was like with a gun. You don't come out the effing car. The shorter one was at Jassie's side.
The second crucial piece of evidence was pictures and videos captured on the day of the shooting, showing the defendants posing and dancing with the stolen money.
It shows Williams fanning $100 bills and surrounded by money. And this video taken at 12:35 a.m. This time Williams appears to be in a car, also fanning $100 bills, smiling and singing.
And finally, the testimony of Robert Allen ultimately sealed the deal, providing the final piece of evidence that convicted the defendants.
Who shoots the shots that are fired?
Michael Boatwright.
And who does he shoot?
Triple X.
Where does he shoot him from? What side of the car?
Allen claimed that Noam grabbed the bag of money, Boatwright shot Onfroy, and Williams was the getaway driver as he sat in the car. Unsurprisingly, the trio were convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael Boatwright received an additional life sentence plus 30 years for being the one who pulled the trigger on Onfroy. As for Robert Allen, his plea deal meant a reduced sentence of 7 years in prison plus 20 years of probation for second-degree murder. Meanwhile, XXXTentacion's promising life was tragically cut short for a few $1,000s. But what happens when an attempted robbery goes horribly wrong? Like in the case of Michael Thomas, who's facing homicide charges in Wisconsin. Reports suggest that in 2011, 16-year-old Thomas was driving around in a stolen minivan with Malik Merchant and Jimmy Scales when they stopped at West Lisbon Avenue and attempted to rob Sharon Staples. Thomas allegedly jumped out of the car and threatened Sharon to give up her purse, but when the 34-year-old resisted, Thomas fatally shot her. Sharon was 12 weeks pregnant at the time. Thomas was arrested and pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree reckless homicide for killing Sharon and her unborn child. At his sentencing, Thomas was initially calm and silent, but then suddenly all hell broke loose. As he was about to leave the courtroom, Thomas looked towards his family and attempted to move towards them. This prompted court deputies to tackle him to the ground, causing an outburst among those sitting in the gallery. The deputies managed to stand him up on his feet, but they couldn't control the teenager. Thomas was restrained and escorted out of the courtroom. The sheriff took hold of the situation and calmed the irate family members down.
Listen, all right, please. No good is going to be done by this courtroom being disrupted, okay? What's going to happen is we are going to allow the other people that were in this courtroom to leave, okay?
Eventually, the crowd started leaving.
No, Sean.
A deputy asked a guy named Chuck to wait, but Chuck was having none of it.
Just wait, okay? We're gonna let everybody go.
Mama right there. Come on, every time I fucking little brother, leave me the fuck alone.
He was promptly cuffed and taken into custody. Ultimately, Michael Thomas was sentenced to 35 years in prison. As for Malik Merchant, who police said acted as a lookout, he was sentenced to 17 years in prison. The getaway driver, Jimmy Scales, who claimed to be a member of the street gang Disciples, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. While Michael Thomas showed great physical strength and defiance in court, what happens when a gang member bursts into tears, like in the case of Brandon Spencer, who's facing attempted murder charges in California? Brandon Spencer, police said, was involved in a shootout at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus in 2012.
He was convicted of shooting a rival gang member at a 2012 Halloween party on the USC campus.
4 people were wounded in the incident. Some students fled the scene while others hid. Reportedly, Spencer also ran with them but was eventually captured by the LAPD. He was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. During his trial, the prosecution argued that Spencer, a known gang member, fired into the crowd in retaliation against a rival gang member.
You are so intent on killing someone that you're willing to shoot them and at the same time open fire into a crowd.
However, Spencer maintained his innocence throughout the trial.
Sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I came to life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
But the jury was having none of it. They found Spencer guilty of all charges. Then, at his sentencing, as the judge read out his fate, Spencer completely lost it.
The minimum period of parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022.
He broke down and banged the table twice with his head before being held back by officers. Ultimately, Spencer was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison for the USC shootings. While Brandon Spencer had a total meltdown in court, how does it compare to a case that terrorized the whole country, like in the case of David Parga, who's on trial for murdering a student in California? In 2006, 27-year-old Leland Washington, an African-American, was reportedly asked to leave a Halloween party where most of the guests were Mexican gang members. Police said Washington came back to the party, which Parga, a La Habra Street gang member, felt was a sign of disrespect. The gangster then walked up to the college graduate and, without provocation, shot him several times in the torso. Washington was rushed to UCI Medical Center, where he died soon after. Parga was arrested and charged with felony murder. He decided to represent himself in court and was eventually found guilty of second-degree murder. During sentencing, family members of Washington addressed their loved one's killer. His brother said Washington did not deserve to go this way.
There's days that the grief is so much that I just kind of muddle through the day. You have to understand who he was. He was such a great person, and the way that he died, he did not deserve that at all.
While their sister spoke about the emptiness left behind by her brother's death.
Halloween weekend will never be the same for us. My brother was murdered that weekend, and it's ironic that we're here today for the sentencing for the person that murdered Leland Cleophas Washington.
The mother of Leland Washington expressed that, if given a chance, her son would have been a great friend to his killer, highlighting the tragic loss and the pain caused by the senseless violence.
He couldn't have been anything but a friend to him. He couldn't have found any other way but to make him a friend.
Parga was also given a chance to speak, where he displayed remorse for his actions and apologized to the victim's family, expressing regret for the senseless violence that took away an innocent life.
I know there's nothing I could do to bring you guys' son back, brother back, but I am deeply sorry for what happened to him. To you specifically, I want to say sorry to what happened to your son. I know the pain you're feeling. My mom comes to see me and she cries because of what's happening to me. And I could only imagine what you're going through. You lost your son.
Joseph Lancia, the president of the Hells Angels biker gang in Rhode Island, was involved in a violent altercation when he fired a gun at a truck driven by Richard Starnino. Starnino, who was once considered a prospect for joining the Hells Angels, had been engaged in an ongoing dispute with Lancia. Although no one was injured in the incident, the situation could have escalated and resulted in serious harm. Lancia was charged with attempted murder, and his position as a leader in the gang made the case particularly high profile. After the shooting incident, where Richard Starnino miraculously survived the attack, a massive raid was conducted at the Hells Angels headquarters. Law enforcement aimed to gather evidence and dismantle the operations of the gang, which had been linked to various criminal activities. The raid was a significant blow to the Hells Angels in Rhode Island as authorities worked to bring those involved in the violent altercation, including Joseph Lancia, to justice.
The bullet struck the passenger side of the vehicle. No one was injured. It should be noted that there were children in the area at that time, and there is a school across the street from the location of this shooting.
Anyone inside 161 Message Street? This is the state police. Come out with your hands up. Do it now.
Some gang members were arrested and taken into custody. Lancia, too, was arrested.
As part of a plea agreement, Joseph Lancia's more severe charges of attempted murder were dropped. Instead, he pleaded no contest to felony assault and battery. This plea deal allowed him to avoid a lengthy sentence for attempted murder, but he still faced significant legal consequences for his actions. The charges reflected the seriousness of the incident, but the reduction in charges highlighted the legal maneuvering that often takes place in high-profile cases involving gang members or individuals with ties to criminal organizations.